see, the world is not truly loud in itself. What is loudness, if not the inner response to the countless impressions that press upon our soul? For those who live with heightened sensitivity, what I would call the thin veil between the conscious and the unconscious, the world does not simply whisper, it thunders. Not because the world has grown noisier, but because their own souls are like finely tuned instruments, capable of resonating with even the faintest vibrations. This is both a gift and a challenge. It is as if you are standing in the middle of a grand symphony, but the music is being played not just by the orchestra of life, but by every subtle current of energy, every hidden intention, every sigh of the collective unconscious. And you cannot simply turn away. The music pours through you. I have often observed in sensitive souls what I might call the archetype of the echo, the one who hears and reflects not only the sounds but the unseen moods of existence. You are not only hearing the external world, you are also hearing the inner world of others, the unspoken pain, the unacknowledged longing, the shadows they refuse to see. This makes the world feel overwhelming. Not because you are weak, but because your perception has not been dulled by the armor that most people build around themselves. You are porous, and through those open places, the tides of the collective enter. It is crucial to understand that sensitivity is not a defect, but a mirror of a deeper reality. The ancient myths knew this well. Think of the oracle at Delphi, who did not merely answer questions, but felt the tremors of the divine in her very bones. A highly sensitive person is not unlike her. The voice of the gods, the voice of the unconscious whispers through your nervous system, whether you want it to or not. The modern world has little patience for this. It demands speed, clarity, hardness, and noise. It asks you to keep up with the rhythm of machines, not the heartbeat of the soul. So when the world feels unbearably loud, it is often not because there is too much sound, but because there is too little silence, too little reverence for the depth that you carry. I would like you to imagine, just for a moment, that you are standing inside your own dream. The dream is full of symbols, some bright, some terrifying, some so quiet you barely notice them. This is how life appears to the sensitive soul. Every glance, every shift of tone, every fragment of beauty or ugliness in the environment speaks to you as if it has meaning. And indeed, it does. The sensitive soul is often closer to the language of the unconscious than those who seem strong and immune. The truth is, those who are immune often live cut off from the deeper streams of existence. They live on the surface while you are dragged into the depths. That is why you may feel exhausted by things that others barely notice. You are not weak, you are deep. Depth comes with its price. When you hear the world too loudly, you also hear the inner voice that calls from beneath the surface of life. You hear the collective suffering that humanity ignores, the archetypal cries of the shadow that is never allowed to speak. The sensitive person often absorbs this shadow unconsciously. You may find yourself feeling sadness that is not yours, anger that is not yours, despair that seems to have no origin. This is not a sign of madness, but of connection. You are like a lightning rod for the psyche. The question is not how to escape this loudness, but how to make peace with it, how to cultivate an inner space where the noise of the world can be transmuted into meaning. Many people confuse sensitivity with fragility. They do not understand that what appears as fragility is often a great inner attunement to reality. In my work with dreams and archetypes, I have seen that the most sensitive individuals are those who are closest to the source. They are like the poet who hears the murmurs of the muse, or the mystic who trembles before the vision of the divine. But modern culture tells them they are too emotional, too dramatic. So they begin to silence themselves, to build a false persona that appears calm and invulnerable. Yet this only deepens their suffering. The persona, our social mask, is meant to protect us. But if we identify with it too completely, we become cut off from the truth of who we are. And for the sensitive soul, this disconnection is like a slow spiritual death. I have seen many sensitive individuals who suffer not because of their sensitivity, but because they have not yet learned to claim it as a strength. They live as if being sensitive is a curse, when in truth it is a kind of initiation. The loudness of the world is an initiation into the deeper currents of the psyche. If you can bear it, if you can hold the tension without collapsing, you begin to see patterns that others cannot see. You begin to hear not just the surface noise, but the music beneath it. This is where meaning is born. I once had a patient who dreamed of standing in a great cathedral. In the dream, the cathedral was filled with echoes, not of music, but of countless voices whispering secrets. The dream terrified him because he felt he could not escape those voices. But I told him, you are hearing the voice of the collective unconscious. You are hearing what others refuse to hear. Over time, he realized that these whispers were not meant to destroy him, but to guide him. They were telling him something about his own vocation to be a listener, a witness to the depth of the soul. If you feel the world is too loud, it is because you are hearing not just the surface, but the depths. You are feeling the archetype stir within the collective unconscious. The mother who grieves, the child who longs for safety, the shadow who hungers for recognition. These are not merely personal feelings. They are ancient forces, older than civilization. They speak through you, and they ask for your attention. If you deny them, they will grow louder and more chaotic. But if you turn toward them, if you allow them to speak, they can become your greatest allies. It is often in the loudness that we find our calling. The world shouts not to punish you, but to awaken you. When you feel overwhelmed, ask yourself, what is this noise pointing to? What is the deeper meaning beneath the chaos? Sensitivity is the path of the alchemist you must take in the raw impressions of life and transform them into insight, beauty, or wisdom. You cannot do this by shutting yourself down or numbing yourself. You can only do it by listening deeply and with courage to what the soul is trying to tell you. You may think that Jungian psychology is only about symbols and dreams, but at its core, it is about living with depth. And depth requires that we listen not just with the ears, but with the heart and the unconscious. The highly sensitive person is often already half a mystic without knowing it. Your openness to the world is an openness to the unconscious. But this openness can also make you vulnerable to being flooded. That is why you must learn to create an inner sanctuary, a place of stillness where you can meet the noise with presence rather than fear. Think of a great forest. To the untrained ear, it is full of random sounds, birds, insects, the wind, the cracking of branches. But to the one who truly listens, every sound belongs to a greater harmony. Sensitivity is not about being overwhelmed by the forest, but about learning to hear the symphony of life. You are like the forest itself, full of voices, full of secrets, full of life. You see, when I speak of the world being loud, I am not only referring to the external sounds, the cars, the conversations, the constant hum of modernity. I am speaking of the psychic noise, the unseen currents of emotion, the unspoken expectations that ripple through the collective. For someone whose psyche is porous, these currents strike like invisible waves. You feel them even when you do not want to. You walk into a room, and before a single word is spoken, you know what is happening beneath the surface. You sense the tension, the grief, the unspoken anger. This is not imagination. It is a heightened intuition that arises from your connection to the unconscious. Most people live with thick walls around their psyche. They have built these walls through years of conditioning, through the repression of emotion, through the refusal to listen to what their own inner world is saying. You, however, have not fully built these walls, or perhaps they have never been yours to build. This is why you feel as though the world invades you. But I say to you, the task is not to build walls, but to grow roots. The sensitive soul does not need to harden itself. It needs to deepen itself, to root itself so firmly in its own truth that the winds of the collective cannot tear it apart. There is a dream that often recurs among those who are highly sensitive. It is a dream of the flood. In such a dream, water comes rushing in. Water that is unstoppable, overwhelming, threatening to drown the dreamer. This water is the unconscious. It is the flood of collective feeling that pours into the individual when their boundaries are weak. But there is a key in this dream. The water is not only destructive, it is cleansing. The dreamer who learns to swim in this water, who learns to trust its currents, will discover a new kind of strength. The same is true in waking life. Sensitivity requires that you learn to swim in the waters of the soul, rather than trying to dam them up. When the world feels loud, the temptation is to retreat, to hide, to withdraw, and indeed, there is wisdom in retreat. Every sensitive soul needs moments of solitude, moments when the inner world can breathe. Solitude is not a luxury for you, it is a necessity. But there is a difference between solitude and isolation. Isolation is a form of fear, a closing off from life. Solitude, on the other hand, is an opening a space where the self can speak, where the symbols of the unconscious can rise without distortion. You must cultivate such solitude as one tends to a sacred fire. Without it, you will burn out. The world has forgotten the importance of the inner voice. We are taught to listen only to what is loudest, to the external authorities, to the constant demands of progress and productivity. But for the sensitive soul, the real authority is within. Your task is to listen inwardly, even when the world is shouting, especially when the world is shouting, because beneath that shouting, there is a whisper, and that whisper belongs to your soul. In my own work, I have seen that those who are most sensitive are often carrying an archetypal role in the collective. They are like the canaries in the coal mine. They feel the toxicity of a culture long before others are aware of it. They sense when something is wrong, when something is out of balance. This is why the modern world is so difficult for them. Our society is profoundly out of balance. We worship speed, noise, and surface appearances, while neglecting depth, silence, and the soul. No wonder you feel overwhelmed. You are trying to live in a world that refuses to honor the very qualities that define you. But rather than seeing this as a curse, I invite you to see it as a calling. You are called to be a guardian of the inner world. You are called to be a reminder to yourself and to others that life is not only about outer achievement, but about inner wholeness. This wholeness is not found in noise, but in the quiet depths of being. There is an ancient image that speaks to this, the image of the hermit who carries a lantern through the dark forest. The hermit is not isolated because he hates the world. He walks alone because he listens to the inner light, which can only be heard in silence. You, too, must carry your own lantern when the world feels deafening, when its chaos threatens to drown you. Hold fast to that inner light. It will guide you through the forest of noise. I must also speak of the shadow. The shadow is not only personal, it is collective. When you are highly sensitive, you feel not only your own shadow, but also the shadows of others. This is why certain places or people may feel suffocating to you. It is not just the words they speak, but the unspoken truths they carry. The repressed feelings that radiate from them like an unseen storm. The challenge for you is not to absorb these shadows unconsciously, but to recognize them for what they are. You must learn to say, "This is not mine." Otherwise, you will carry the wounds of others as if they were your own. Dreams can be powerful guides in this process. Pay attention to what your dreams show you. When you feel overwhelmed, they will often present images of the noise, symbols of the chaos, but they will also show you the path to balance. Perhaps you dream of a small, quiet garden in the midst of a city, or of a mountain above the storm. These are not random images. They are messages from the unconscious, telling you where to find refuge. It is also worth saying that sensitivity is not a modern invention. The ancient mystics, shamans, and poets were all highly sensitive. They lived at the edge of the known world, listening to the whispers of the gods and the murmurs of the earth. You belong to that same lineage, whether you realize it or not. Your nervous system is tuned to a frequency that others ignore, and while this can feel like a burden, it is also a bridge to deeper meaning, to unseen truths, to the realm of the archetypal. When I speak of archetypes, I am speaking of patterns that live beyond our personal stories. The sensitive soul is often closest to the archetype of the healer, or the oracle, or the poet. These archetypes demand that you feel deeply, that you allow yourself to be touched by life. They do not ask you to be comfortable, they ask you to be awake. And being awake means you will feel both the beauty and the suffering of the world more intensely. But this intensity is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to forge you. The forging of a sensitive soul is not a gentle process. It is like the alchemical work of transforming base metals into gold. The raw material is your openness, your vulnerability, your ability to perceive what others ignore. But this raw material must be purified through fire, through the confrontation with the shadow, through the acceptance of both light and darkness within yourself. Only then can sensitivity become wisdom rather than a source of suffering. I have often said that no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. For those who are highly sensitive, this descent into the underworld is not a choice, it is a calling. The loudness of the world pushes you inward, forcing you to face the places where your own soul trembles. You must ask yourself, what in me resonates with this chaos? What in me is still unintegrated, still wounded, still seeking? The world becomes loudest when we resist what it is trying to show us. The collective unconscious, which I have spent much of my life studying, is not an abstract concept for the sensitive soul. It is a lived reality. You may walk through a crowd and feel as though you are walking through a sea of dreams. Each person carrying their own ghosts, their own archetypal dramas, and you, like a tuning fork, begin to vibrate with all of these unspoken stories. This can be overwhelming if you do not recognize what is happening. But once you see it, you realize that you are not just feeling your own life, you are feeling the life of the world. This recognition can be both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying, because it shows you just how vast and uncontrollable the human psyche is. Liberating, because it reveals that your suffering is not personal. It is part of the larger human story, part of the great myth that is unfolding across time. When you understand this, you begin to hold your sensitivity differently. You no longer see it as a weakness, but as a doorway into a greater reality. Let me tell you something about the archetype of the wounded healer. In every culture, there is a figure who becomes a healer, not because they are untouched by pain, but because they have felt it so deeply that they understand the suffering of others. Sensitivity is the mark of such healers. You cannot heal what you cannot feel. Your ability to feel the world so intensely, to hear its cries and whispers, is the very thing that allows you to bring light where there is darkness. But to do this, you must first learn to heal yourself, not by numbing your sensitivity, but by learning to navigate it with grace. Grace comes from understanding. When you know that your sensitivity is rooted in something archetypal, something larger than your personal history, you begin to respect it. You stop trying to fix yourself, and instead you begin to listen. What is this sensitivity trying to teach you? Perhaps it is asking you to slow down, to live in a way that honors depth over speed, meaning over noise. Perhaps it is showing you where the soul of the world is wounded and asking you to become a voice for healing. The modern world is obsessed with constant stimulation. We are bombarded by images, sounds, and information at every moment. For someone who feels deeply, this is like being in a storm with no shelter. That is why you must create your own sanctuary, not as an escape, but as a place of renewal. This sanctuary might be a physical space, like a quiet room or a place in nature. But more importantly, it must be an inner sanctuary. It must be a space within you where the noise of the world cannot penetrate. You may wonder, how do I create such a sanctuary? The answer lies in conscious attention. When you turn your awareness inward, when you breathe and listen to the stillness beneath the surface of your mind, you begin to touch something eternal. You realize that beneath all the noise, there is a silence that is vast and unshakable. This silence is not empty, it is full of presence, full of life. It is the ground of your being. The sensitive soul must learn to rest here, to draw strength from this inner well. In dreams, this sanctuary often appears as a garden or a temple. These are symbols of the self, the center of the psyche, where all opposites are reconciled. When you feel overwhelmed, imagine yourself walking into this inner temple. It is a place where the world cannot follow, where the noise becomes distant. From here, you can observe the world without being consumed by it. You can listen without losing yourself. Another important thing to understand is that sensitivity is deeply connected to creativity. The same openness that makes you feel overwhelmed also makes you capable of great imagination, great insight, great beauty. Many artists, writers, and visionaries are highly sensitive people. They take in the chaos of the world and transform it into something meaningful, something that speaks to the soul of others. Perhaps this is your task as well, not to hide from the noise, but to turn it into art, into wisdom, into something that illuminates. But you cannot do this if you are constantly at war with your own nature. You must accept that you are different. You must honor your own rhythm, even if it does not match the rhythm of the world. When others rush, you may need to slow down. When others are content to skim the surface, you may need to dive deep. This is not a flaw. It is your path. There is a paradox here. The more you resist your sensitivity, the more overwhelming it becomes. But when you embrace it, when you allow yourself to feel and to listen, it transforms. What once felt like noise begins to reveal patterns. Like the hidden geometry of a mandala, you begin to see that every sound, every feeling, every impression has its place in the larger whole. The world is not just loud, it is alive. And you, as a sensitive soul, have the privilege of experiencing this aliveness in its full intensity. To live as a sensitive soul in a loud world is to live on the threshold between two realms, the outer and the inner. The conscious and the unconscious, the ordinary and the archetypal. It is to stand at the doorway where the invisible currents of the psyche press against the visible forms of life, shaping them, coloring them, giving them a hidden depth. Most people rush past this doorway. too distracted or afraid to look, but you cannot help but see it. You feel its presence in every encounter, every glance, every silence that carries a weight of meaning. This threshold existence can be disorienting. It is as if you are always living in two realities at once. On the surface, you play the roles the world expects of you. You speak the language of ordinary life, pretending that everything is simple, straightforward, manageable, but beneath the surface, you sense the vast, mysterious undercurrents that shape all things. You feel the archetypes moving like great forces through human interactions, the lover, the warrior, the orphan, the sage. You see how people act out their hidden dramas without knowing it, how they project their shadows onto others, how they run from the very truths that could set them free. And all of this noise, this psychic turbulence flows into you. The task of the sensitive soul is not to close this doorway, but to learn how to stand at it without being torn apart. This requires both courage and humility. Courage, because you must face the truth, that others avoid the pain, the chaos, the shadow aspects of humanity. Humility, because you must accept that you cannot fix or control all that you feel. You are not meant to carry the world's suffering on your shoulders. You are meant to witness it, to understand it, and to transform your relationship with it. There is a dream I once heard from someone who struggled with this very challenge. In the dream, she was standing at the edge of a great ocean, and the waves were crashing so loudly that she thought she would go deaf. She tried to run from the sound, but no matter where she went, it followed her. Finally, exhausted, she stood still, and in that stillness, she realized that the ocean was not outside of her, it was within her. The noise was not something to escape, but something to integrate. When she listened deeply, the noise became music. This is the alchemy of sensitivity, to turn the unbearable into the meaningful, the overwhelming into the illuminating. Jungian psychology teaches us that every encounter with the unconscious is both dangerous and healing. Dangerous, because the unconscious can flood us with energies that we do not yet know how to handle. Healing, because these same energies carry the raw material of transformation. For the highly sensitive person, this encounter is not occasional. It is constant. You are always feeling the brush of the unconscious, always hearing its whispers and roars. This means that your path is not an ordinary one. You are being called to develop a relationship with the unseen forces that shape life. You are being asked to become a mediator between worlds. This mediation requires what I would call inner architecture. Without an inner structure, you will be swept away by the tides of sensation and emotion. But this structure is not built by denying your sensitivity. It is built by understanding it. You must come to know your own depths, your own patterns, your own shadow. You must learn the language of your dreams, for they are the compass of your soul. When the world becomes too loud, your dreams will show you why. They will reveal what is being stirred in your unconscious, what needs attention, what is asking for integration. The shadow, of course, plays a central role in this. The shadow is everything that we reject or repress within ourselves, our fears, our anger, our desire, our wounds. For the sensitive person, the shadow can feel especially heavy because you not only carry your own shadow, but often sense the shadow of others. You might walk into a room and feel anger that does not belong to you, or sadness that has no clear source. This is because your own unconscious is resonating with the collective shadow. It is as if you are a mirror for the parts of humanity that others refuse to face. But here lies an opportunity. When you recognize the shadow for what it is, you no longer become its victim. You can name it, witness it, and even befriend it. This is the work of individuation, the process of becoming whole. Individuation is not about becoming perfect or immune to pain. It is about integrating all parts of yourself, including the parts that are difficult or frightening. For the sensitive soul, individuation means learning to stand in the midst of the world's noise without losing your center. It means knowing that the loudness is not a sign of your failure, but a sign of your connection. There is a paradox that I have observed many times. The more one tries to silence the noise, the louder it becomes. Resistance amplifies what we fear. But when you turn toward the noise, when you listen to it as if it were a teacher, something shifts. The noise begins to speak in symbols rather than static. You realize that what you thought was chaos is actually a message from the unconscious. It is telling you something about your own path, your own growth, your own calling. For example, consider the sensitive person who is overwhelmed by the suffering they see in the world. They might feel hopeless, as if they are drowning in pain. But if they look deeper, they might discover that this suffering is awakening their own compassion, their own desire to bring light into dark places. The very thing that overwhelms them is also the thing that reveals their purpose. This is the transformative power of sensitivity. You must understand that the loudness you experience is not merely an obstacle. It is a threshold. It is an invitation to walk into a deeper, more symbolic understanding of life. The sensitive soul hears not only the sounds of the external world, but also the murmurings of what I have called the collective unconscious. When the world feels too loud, it is often because these murmurings are calling for your attention. They ask you to turn inward, to face the archetypal images and patterns that shape human life. They ask you to see beyond the surface noise and listen for the truth beneath. This listening is not passive. It requires a certain kind of active attention, a willingness to be transformed by what you hear. If you only resist the noise, you will feel crushed by it. But if you approach it as a guide, you will find that it leads you to insights you could not have discovered otherwise. For example, when you feel overwhelmed by the emotions of others, ask yourself, what is this teaching me about boundaries, about compassion, about the difference between my energy and the collective energy? When you are shaken by the chaos of the world, ask, what part of me is being asked to awaken? Every sensitive soul is on a journey of initiation. This initiation often begins with the experience of feeling too much emotion, too much noise. too much chaos. But as you travel deeper, you begin to see that these too much moments are actually thresholds of transformation. They are like the gates in old myths, guarded by dragons or sphinxes. At first, these gates seem terrifying, but if you approach them with courage, they reveal treasures on the other side. One of these treasures is the ability to perceive meaning where others see only confusion. Sensitivity is a form of perception, a way of reading the hidden symbols in life. When someone speaks, you do not only hear their words, you feel the archetype behind them. The story they are unconsciously telling. When you walk through nature, you do not only see trees and sky, you feel the presence of the ancient living world. When you listen to music, it is not only sound, it is a door into a realm beyond time. This is not an accident. It is the natural gift of those whose souls are attuned to depth. However, every gift comes with its shadow. The shadow of sensitivity is the risk of being consumed by the very impressions you perceive. This is why you must cultivate what I call psychic hygiene, the ability to cleanse your inner world of what does not belong to you. This might mean taking time every day to be in silence, to breathe, to let go of the emotions and energies that are not yours. It might mean expressing yourself through creative acts, painting, writing, music, so that the impressions you receive are given a form, a place to live outside of you. Creativity is not optional for the sensitive soul. It is the way you transmute what you feel into something that can heal rather than harm. In many cultures, the sensitive ones were seen as seers, healers, or visionaries. They were not dismissed as too much. They were revered for their ability to feel the pulse of the unseen. The modern world, in its rush towards speed and efficiency, has forgotten this wisdom, but that does not mean it is lost. You carry it still in your very being. When you honor your sensitivity, you are keeping alive a sacred tradition, the tradition of listening to the soul. I have often encountered individuals who come to me broken by the weight of their own perceptions. They say, I feel everything too strongly. The world is too much for me. And I tell them, yes, you feel deeply because you are alive to the unconscious. You are not meant to numb this feeling, but to integrate it. You are not here to be like everyone else. You are here to remind us that life is not only what we see on the surface, but what we feel and dream and imagine. Once they understand this, a shift occurs. What once felt like a curse begins to feel like a sacred responsibility. The journey of the sensitive soul is also the journey of the self. The self, as I have described, is the center of the psyche, the totality of who we are. It is not only our conscious ego, but also the vast field of the unconscious. To reach the self, we must face the full spectrum of experience, joy and sorrow, beauty and darkness, silence and noise. The world may feel loud because it is pressing you toward this realization. It is asking you to see that every sound, every feeling, every encounter is a reflection of something within. When you look at your own life through this lens, you begin to see patterns emerge. Perhaps you notice that certain places or people always leave you feeling drained. This is not random. It is a sign that something in your unconscious is being activated. Perhaps you see that certain dreams repeat themselves, showing images of noise or chaos. These dreams are not meaningless, they are messages. They are asking you to pay attention, to find what part of you is crying out for balance. One of the most powerful ways to find this balance is through ritual. Ritual is the language of the unconscious. It gives form to what cannot be spoken. For the sensitive soul, simple rituals, a moment of silence at dawn, lighting a candle in the evening, walking in nature with intention can create a bridge between the inner and outer worlds. These rituals remind you that you are not powerless before the noise. You can choose how to meet it. You can transform it through presence. There is an image that often comes to me when I think of sensitive souls, the image of a tuning fork. A tuning fork vibrates when it comes into contact with a sound that matches its frequency. You are like this tuning fork, resonating with the world around you. But a tuning fork can also create harmony. It can bring other instruments into tune. Likewise, your sensitivity can help bring harmony to the people and environments around you. If you learn to hold your vibration steady. To hold steady does not mean to resist or to harden. It means to stand rooted in your own being, to know who you are beyond the noise. It means to recognize that while you feel the world deeply, you are not defined by its chaos. You are defined by the depth of your own inner silence, by the strength of your connection to the self. When you live from this center, the noise no longer overpowers you. It becomes part of the larger music of life. I will leave you with this. Sensitivity is not something you need to overcome. It is something you need to inhabit. It is the path through which you will find your own wholeness, your own connection to the great mystery of existence. The world may never grow quieter, but you can grow deeper. You can become the still point in the midst of the storm. And from this still point, you will see that the loudness of the world is not a threat, but an invitation, a call to awaken, to feel, to live fully. In time, you may even come to love the very things that once overwhelmed you, because you will see that every sound, every vibration, every wave of feeling is part of a living dialogue between your soul and the soul of the world. And in this dialogue, you are not alone. You are part of something vast, something timeless, something sacred,